like to call to order the Public Safety Committee, February 21st, 2023 committee meeting for the city of Plattsburgh, New York, calling the meeting to order at 5:01 p.m. I'll take attendance.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, okay. So the recording just started. I'll start with taking attendance. Chairperson Bopp, I am present. Councilor Bond.
Here.
Councilor Kelly.
Here.
And Mayor Rosenquist.
Here.
I will first take a motion to approve the minutes of the January 17th, 2023 Public Safety Committee. Motion by Mayor Rosenquist, second by Councilor Kelly. All in favor?
Aye.
Seeing none opposed, the minutes are approved. Moving on to items 2, the building inspector reports, starting with 2.1, the monthly violations report. And actually, if nobody objects, we could discuss all these reports 2.1 through 2.3 all together. Does anybody object to that?
No.
Okay, great. So if anybody has any questions about any of these reports, no, doesn't look like any. I was curious. I just noticed when I was looking at the citizen complaints and proactive patrol, I was just kind of wondering, because like it seemed like some of the complaints get addressed pretty quickly, like they might only take a matter of 9 days or something like that, and some of them have been outstanding for some time. So I was just wondering what kind of what prioritizes the complaints or how that works.
What prioritizes the proactive complaints?
Yeah, it just seemed like when I was looking at on the report, I think it was the citizens complaint report, and I could pull it up, but it just seemed like there were some that might have only been reported, even in early February, and they've already been addressed. And it looked like there were others that had been open longer, and I just didn't know, what kind of might impact that. So just curious about that.
I mean, I think I understand the question. It's hard to give a perfect answer to that. It depends on what's happening on that day. I mean, let's say we got a complaint in the morning about anything. We would try to investigate it that same day. At least try to make contact with somebody. It may take a couple of days until we actually, consider the investigation complete and are able to either deem it invalid or, work on the solution.
Okay.
I mean, if you had a specific concern about it, you see this one and what's going on with that, I'd be happy to look into that a little further. Just in general, complaints come into the office, our office administrator dishes them out to the inspectors that work that area, and maybe even if she sees somebody who has more free time based on the schedule and the system. So those are usually looked at every day.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about it. Like I said, when just looking at the dates and the statuses of things and whatnot, I figured it probably did have a lot to do with the ability to reach the people.
I mean, some issues take longer to get resolved, but that doesn't mean we're not working on it.
Of course. Okay. Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. Does anybody have any other questions about any of the building inspector reports?
Nothing about the reports, but I don't even remember if I asked this the last time, and I apologize for that.
No problem.
Let's say Sally that lives on my street has a neighbor who has questionable things happening in their yard. But when you asked me about them, I wasn't sure exactly, because we discussed the last time. Just because somebody has garbage in their yard doesn't mean it's bad garbage. It does make sense. Where do I find it so I can tell this person, read it here, it will itemize what is bad garbage, what is bad to have in a person's yard, or
Okay, so we all may have a different opinion on what that might be. Usually what we go down to is it waste? Is it something that would normally be thrown out? If your constituent wants to talk to us about it, we can talk to them off the record, and we can even do a site visit from their property, looking onto the neighborhood and seeing if that's an issue. Garbage is almost always a violation, just garbage. you know, to some degree. Where we run into trouble is if it just looks junk. You know, lots of times it's with children's toys. It's a good example. Those kind of plasticky looking children's toys that are just scattered around the yard. There is no code that says you can only have 3 little tricycles and they have to be stacked up in the corner. You
Okay,
know, that kind of thing. So
okay,
if anybody has a question, they can, even if they think, you know, they may not have a great relationship with their neighbor and they're concerned about how that conversation might go, they can talk to me about that off the record. We'll sort it out and,
okay, okay.
the
Yeah, 'cause
fact is,
I wasn't sure. I'm like, well, what are we talking? Refrigerators and washing machine, you know, what are we talking about? And I don't know if it's okay or not, and I don't know where to look to see if it's okay. So
Yeah,
I couldn't help her.
you're probably not, there's probably no place to look to say, oh, okay, so that,
It's not good.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, it's just, is it hazardous materials, is it household waste, is it a refrigerator? The doors either have to be removed or it has to be locked shut. In the meantime, while it's being,
Okay,
getting ready to be thrown away.
I'll just ask her to.
I mean,
take photos and send photos to, that's always.
That's a
yeah,
really good idea.
one quick picture, and we take anonymous complaints, so we don't have to take their name. Now, I will tell you that sometimes there's no way to hide from yourself. Maybe the only person that can see that is the neighbor. I'm trying to finesse that too,
Yeah. Okay, all right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any further discussion about any of these reports? Okay, all right, thank you so much. I think we're all set. Yeah. Okay, moving on to items number, again, I'd make the same proposition for 3.1 through 3.4, that we could discuss them all kind of together. So does anybody have any specific questions regarding any of the police department reports at this time?
I'm good.
Pretty standard reports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will note, Mayor, that as you folks know, we did start an animal control officer this year, for the first time in a while. Wonderful job, very, very conscientious. People are, he's been to a lot of wild animal complaints. We actually, the funny thing, the police department had some raccoons upstairs in our building.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, we had one of our sergeants, he was a trapper. He said, "Oh, I'll get those." He tried, couldn't get them. Charlie, the first day I told him about it, he got 4 the first day and 1 the next day. He got 5 in 2 days. And then we cleaned it back up, so he can't get back up there. He's really, really good. And that was your recommendation, so good job.
You found me. If it pleases the council, we can certainly ask Chief to work with Charlie to push some information out on how many, what kind of animals have been tracked.
I'm good.
Okay. All right.
That's just me though. I'm
I think it would be helpful.
an animal advocate,
Okay,
so I
No,
just.
no, we didn't hurt him. We just got him.
Yeah, no, we don't hurt and
We don't hurt
take.
him. They're live traps.
Are they?
Oh, yeah, we didn't hurt him at all.
Yeah.
I like,
We
we
raise them.
raise the raccoons and some off, she'll get a wild raccoon and raise it, so yeah, I don't know, we don't hurt.
Cause I'll be honest, I have a possum family that comes right up on my porch and don't leave anything on the porch, cause,
Well, they'll get-
and I. Contemplated calling, but I'm afraid that they'll be hurt and.
No, Charlie does not like hurt animals. He's very, so if you need him moved, just call.
Okay,
Yeah, I've already heard really, really good feedback from people who have had to use the service already. So I'm very glad that it's in place.
That's just what I was gonna say. Some of my neighbors have taken advantage of the Charlie services and are real pleased with what they see. So, please tell him we said thank you.
We'll do, yeah, I see him every day, he stops by, very conscientious.
I did have a question just about the payroll report, but I don't know if I'm just not seeing it, but it looks like for the fire department, we got the totals for January, but it looks for PD, I'm looking at the totals for last year. So it looks like through December. Do we have the data for
I'm
January yet?
sorry, I think that the sheet was not updated accurately, so I'll get that updated and then send it back out to council, tomorrow or Thursday.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to be able to take a peek at that. Any other questions or discussion about any of the other items, 3.1 through 3.4?
No.
Okay, all right, seeing none, we will move on to item 3.5. On the agenda, there's a misprint. It says on the, at least the one I'm looking at, says authorize 1 new police officer position, and the resolution, of
Yeah.
course, is a request to authorize 4 new police officer positions.
So, to clarify that, if you want to take a motion in a second, we can continue to talk about it, but I'm gonna ask that the council how about we take a motion in a second, Counselor, and I'll explain the entire situation, and then we can do an amendment to the resolution as it's listed.
Okay, so, all right, so with respect to item 3.5, authorize, I guess I'll read it from the agenda. Hold on one second. Authorize 1 new police officer position. Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion by Mayor Rosenquist, second by Councilor Bond. All right, so discussion.
Yeah, so as I sent a memo out a little bit later, but to follow up on the initial conversation for the request the initial conversation we had at the January Public Safety Committee meeting regarding adding officers and finding room to add officers considering the projected retirements for 2024 in the number of upwards of 7 members of the department are going to be retired. In our calculations based on some succession planning promotions, budget 2023 budget, as well as some anticipated staffing changes, we are looking at enough funding in the 2023 budget to support 3 of these 4 officers added. And that's currently budgeted. So that's not something, I don't believe that that's something that the council needs to approve because we're going to remain within the 2023 budget. However, in the request was for new officers, which is why the resolution title was changed. So in having additional conversations with Chief and with Julie, it's been identified that the ask here is an ask to the council to allow the department to spend $13,000 above what was already budgeted for 2023, the 1100 line in 2023. Furthermore, we are anticipating 2 officers leaving to transfer to other agencies in July, which will produce an overall 1100 savings of 55,000. So for the budgeted year, so adding this 13K will essentially net a total of 37,000 would be a net savings to what was budgeted. If the council were to approve that 13,000 expenditure over what was already budgeted.
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm more inclined to stay within the budget. That's what I'd like to see us do. I think it's really early in the year to already be, going into the budget like this. So I think my preference would be to work with what we have. I'm definitely open to hearing what other counselors have to say, and would certainly be open to potentially moving this to the regular meeting so that other counselors have the opportunity to consider it. But my particular position would be to work with the 3 that we can afford at this time based on our current budget.
Yeah, even though it's anticipated that we will lose those 2 officers in July, it's not certain. What is certain is the math that we currently have works out that we can support adding 3 officers within the budget, and still save, and still save, on the 1100. I should say, still, stay within the budgeted amount for the 1100 line in the approved 2023 budget. Talking with Chief, we understood that coming into this conversation. We are happy to move forward with the 3 that we initially came to ask for without asking for the additional. I believe, Chief can speak for himself, but I'm okay with that, with also understanding that come 2024 budget, we will be looking at anticipation of losing 7 officers sometime in the year and preparing for the academy in 2024 to add, or to backfill some of those officers depending on the departmental needs.
I have to admit to some confusion.
Yes.
Mayor, we talked about this a little bit this morning.
Correct.
And I was under the understanding that last year, Chief York asked for a certain number of new employees for his department. And you were in a position to say, no, we can't afford that many, but we can't afford 5.
Yep.
And that was what we budgeted for, was 5.
Correct.
And I have a little bit of a problem understanding where the other, you talked about 3 and possibly 4. Where are they coming?
So we asked, 5 were budgeted, 2 of whom are, one of whom is a transfer back, former Plattsburgh PD officer who went elsewhere and is coming back. That person is not going into the academy. That person's going right onto the another person is a current employee in the Plattsburgh Police Department. So the monies that were budgeted for adding that officer is essentially being consumed by that person moving over, and then there are some savings or some monies left over from his older position. That's one pocket of money. The other 3 officers that are going, the new cadets that are going into the academy, those were also budgeted. Conversations regarding succession planning, promotions, moving people around yields roughly $111,000 of savings on the 1100 line, which is where we get this money from to add those 3 officers, still remaining within our budget, but adding those 3 officers into the academy, coming this academy. The 4th officer that we are talking about here, even though we did find $111,000 savings in that kind of promotion and succession planning, that's where this $13,000 overage comes from, because we just don't have enough. We wouldn't have enough to add that 4th person without asking for an increase to the 1100 line from the general fund. Now, even though, like I mentioned, like just to clarify this as well, even though I mentioned that there is an anticipation that come July, we will have 2 members of the current police department moving to other agencies. That's roughly a $50,000 savings to the 1100 line. But if we were to again add another officer, that 4th officer, it would yield what was it, $34,000 in overall savings in the year. But again, we can't be certain that that's going to happen. They could change their mind. As noted by Councilor Bob, extending the budget past what was already approved. Again, Chief and I spoke about this, and we understood that that could be the potential of the council's wishes to not do that.
Is there any way we could get, because there's a lot of, if this person does this, if this person goes here, and there's a lot of moving, a lot of coming in, a lot of going out. Is there any way we could get an organizational chart based on new hires? Just, it would make it things.
We can provide another, we typically provide that during budget cycle. We could provide another one, certainly. Yeah,
it would help me.
Sure. And also just keep in mind we've had discussions internally about succession planning and promotions, and that's still being worked out. So a lot of the information that we will share is confidential because of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Also, Mike, what figures into that additional monies is, we had 1 police detective and 1 police officer left. So that those 2 salaries are alone are almost $140,000 that are in the budget. So that will be paying for some of the new officers. And you people approved actually, right, 2 positions for this year's budget?
3,
I think 2,
2.
yeah, 2.
Yeah.
For the monies, but that's where we're getting the money, and the cost of what we want to do is $190,000. That leaves us $111,000 savings on that line.
After all these additions are made.
Yes.
we Still have an additional $111,000.
We have that left over, which would pay,
For the
which
3.
we're asking to pay for the 3 extra, or
Yeah,
The one extra.
The 3
the
extra.
3 extra, the 111,000 is paying for the 3 extra for the academy, which starts in April. It doesn't give us enough to get the 4 that we wanted. That's where the $13,000 comes.
I mean, this is hard for me. Because. If I can't get the flow chart, if the flow chart is, is probably not, maybe not advisable, I don't know. But I just need something, I'm sitting here and I'm writing, well, this person's leaving, this person's coming in. I need it on paper, just so I can see, well, if this person's leaving and this one's coming in and this is X amount of dollars being saved or what. It's just, for me, it would be easier.
I'm with you on the same
Okay.
page. Yeah, just to give you an example, when I started here, actually a year ago today, we had 48 members in the police department, including the chief, 2 lieutenant, or 1 lieutenant that was promoted. That 48, we had 4 that retired in the summer. So that 48 is now, right now, down to 38.
Mhm.
Okay, so with this new academy, with the 5 we're putting through, and the new guy we're hiring 6, puts us up to 44 total. And we're still 4 short of what we had a year ago. If that helps you
It does.
think about it a little
Yeah.
better, yeah.
Seeing the dollar
Yeah.
movement would be good too.
When you say 48, chief, are you talking about civilians and sworn officers?
No, just the sworn officers,
48 total sworn officers.
48 sworn officers, including me and the 2 lieutenants.
Okay. And how many civilian employees? do we have?
We have Tori and we have 2, I think 6. And plus after that, we have the school officers, there's another 6, so there's 12. And we have the the crossing guards,
Yeah.
that's
those are-
6
those are-
crossing guards, and we have the 2 school officers.
I was able to keep up with you till we got to the crossing guard, but I counted 56. 48 plus 6 civilians is 54.
54.
And then
Then I think there's 6 or 7 crossing guards. So then I'm up to what, 61? And the 2 school officers.
that's
So total employees is about 63.
And just as a reminder, Julie, you might not know this, the resource officers are reimbursed. The public housing officers reimbursed. The two civilian parking enforcement officers are not paid for out of the general fund either. So those monies are not, they don't come out of, say, the parking enforcement officers don't come out of the PD's general fund, that's a parking fund, separate fund in the city. Even though the school resource officers and the PHA officer does come out of the general fund, that money, those are reimbursed back to the city by those supporting agencies. So we get money from the school district and from the housing authority to pay for those security resources.
Out of curiosity, what's the 48? Where do we get that? Is that like by law? I mean,
Oh, no,
why 48?
you'd have to ask people that are here a lot longer than I was here. I think at one point, I looked at some of the old budgets. And I think at one point they had actually 51 police officers or 52 at the most, but I don't know where that number comes from. I don't know. I think the board sets the number. Well, we had 51 one year. Well, we're not going to fill this. So you're down to 48. Few years we had 43, 46, 47. Now it's been fluctuating from the 4 or 5 years that I've looked.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be quarterly.
No.
It would be nice, but it doesn't have to, it's not
No,
written
no,
in stone.
It has to be whatever you guys say it has to be. I can only tell you how work we're doing, and
Okay.
this is what I think we need, but certainly it's your right to do that.
Counselor Rob.
Well, and to that point that I was going to bring up already, we're still waiting for that report, right, Chris? That
Right.
kind of is going to give us some information on what.
Oh, yes, yeah, and I was told, Caitlin, just so you know, the gentleman that was doing the study has finished the study. He turned it over to DCGS. And DCGS figures mid-March to late March, they should have a report for us.
Right. So I'm really eager for that report to help guide some of our decision making with respect to the size of the
I
force.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's why also for now, I'm more inclined to go with the 3 that we can fit already and not necessarily the other.
Understood.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
I certainly understand that.
As noted, when we had this conversation today, we understood that,
Yeah, because they can say, Caitlin, they can say you need 52 officers, or they can say you need 40 officers. So I
Right.
understand you as a civilian will want to see that, and so do I.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in the data, actually. I'm quite eager to see it.
Well, Council, are you suggesting that we change the wording on this resolution to authorize 3 new police officer positions?
Well, what I understood the mayor to have said before is that because that already fits within the budget, that we don't need to authorize that, which is why it says in the agenda, the 1. So Mayor, if you want to clarify that.
Yeah,
It says 4 years.
Council Bob is saying 3 today.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's, and again, it was
Those 3
3.
are budgeted, right?
Correct, the 3 that we're talking about are already budgeted. The wording and again, the wording of the item itself would need to be changed to authorize 1. However, I'm gonna now make a motion to withdraw the item from consideration, considering that we labored, not in a bad way. We've debated effectively.
We made it today. As saying some people use it.
Not a good thing to talk about. Police officers.
So was that a motion to withdraw the item?
Yeah, motion to withdraw, please.
Okay, do I have a second?
Yeah.
I got a second from Counselor Bond. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, seeing none. So this item is now withdrawn from D.
Thanks for your consideration, folks.
One last question.
Yeah.
I just want to understand, how many new police officers are we hiring this year?
We will look at adding 7 into the academy.
7.
7 with a total of 8 new officers coming on.
Okay, that's a return.
The one of them is coming back to the department.
Okay.
You want me to, I think that's different. You want me to interject or no?
Sure.
Well, right now, without the 3, to me, I think we're gonna be putting. If we get the 3, that's 8, we're gonna be putting through the academy. Not including the new guy that's not going to the academy, but it includes the dispatcher that's already.
Yes,
budgeted.
that's right.
All right, so you're not counting him,
No.
then you're correct.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, we're just
Yeah, sorry.
commanding,
Yeah, sorry.
he's right.
One
He's smarter than I
last
am.
quick one. Well, how many officers are we losing either through, some sort of attrition this year or next year?
If we lose the 2, and I think, my feeling is, knowing the state police as I do, I spent 30 years with them. They're gonna have, I spoke with their management just recently, they plan on having, they wanna try to have 4 academies this year. That's a lot for 1 year. They're gonna do 2 simultaneously. So these 2 that work for us, that they've already been up, they're doing the background investigation. So I feel pretty confident that those 2 are gone in July.
That'll be this year.
And then in the spring, maybe start in January, we could lose 7 more. They don't know how many actually are leaving, but I think the majority of them are. I talked to some of them, they wouldn't commit, but I would say 4 or 5 have committed that they're leaving,
These are retirees.
retiring. They had their 20 years on
we're adding 7. And in the, next year approximately.
We lose 5 and lose 2.
9. Right.
Yeah, we're losing 2 plus the 7 next year, so total between this year and next year, we'll end up losing 9. Adding 7 in this academy and losing 9 by next spring, early summer.
Okay, well, what I would recommend is that we stick with this year's budget as we
Yes, as
discussed.
we agreed, yep.
And then plan for whatever we need and
Yes, sir.
budget for whatever we need.
Yeah.
June, July, whenever we get this process, that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thanks for the discussion.
Is that it, Russ?
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I gotta get this hip replaced.
All right.
Okay, so now moving on to items 4.1 and 4.2. Once again, I'll propose we put them together with no objections. Those are the fire department reports. So we have the monthly EMS and fire call report, as well as the monthly payroll and overtime report. So any discussion on these points? Payroll looked good so far, I thought, and that was good. And the overtime looks like the right amount of the pie. So off to a good start.
Nice, that's a great assessment. It's
Totally
right amount of time.
I didn't want to say that, but I like it.
Yeah, again, like Councilor Vaughn, if you look at the bottom of each of those reports, when you get a moment.
Yeah.
It shows, it's fine. It shows you the percent used in the year. It's a good indicator for where we're at tracking wise in the year. Come June
Mhm.
30th, 31st, and we look and say, oh, we're 90% spent through our budget, that's problematic, right? Assistant Chief? Yeah. But typically when we're tracking this, if we get a good gauge on where we're at with payroll spending, both in overtime and right now.
That was good. So any other discussion on the reports? Okay, seeing no further discussion on those items, we can move on to item 4.3, resolution title authorizing revising capital project H5110.78-2021 public service buildings. Can I take a motion? Motion from Mayor Rosenquist, second. Second by Councilor Kelly. Discussion.
As you'll note, this is the second time now that the ramp project is coming to council. There were a number of readjustments. The first time this came, which added, I believe, about $14,000 to the bill, due to finding problems, additional concerns through that through the replacement project. Council approved that. Thank you for doing that. This is the final invoice, hopefully the final invoice. We're expecting no more invoices to come through, which increases about $1,000, a little more than $1,000 on the project, which would be spent out of, I believe, general fund, for $1,000, a little more than 1,000.
All right, so yeah, I'm seeing the difference here.
If you look at the, Counselor, if you look at the, oh, you know what, it wrapped around. If you look at the top section where it says DPW boiler to electric vehicle, right on the bottom of that, there's a number. It says $57,357. That should really be on that other line where it says ramp 2. That's the increase there.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know why that formula like that's a little wonky. But then if you look to see where the project funding comes from, this is the outline of where the funding comes from for these different projects. General fund increase from the 2023 revised, the first column of 2023 revised cost to the second 2023 revised cost shows an increase in the general fund row from $256,027 to $257,310. That's where you see that increase expense. So it's $1,000, a little more than I consider $1,000. I can't do the math right now, but a little more than $1,000 from general fund for this project.
So this addition with $1,000.
Yeah.
Just 1,000.
It is only for the Fire Station 2 ramp project.
Yeah,
And it's anticipated to come out of the general.
that was for a change order.
What had happened was during the project, in an attempt to be as cost conscious as possible, Mike Bissett and DPW was extremely helpful. We obtained materials directly rather than through the contractor, so we avoided any markup on those materials. And there was some rebar, I believe, J&S steel that was purchased for the project, but got invoiced to DPW instead of the fire department. They had the invoice, didn't know where it went, and it sat on their desk for a few months until it was discovered. And that's what caused that.
That made that additional $1,000.
Right, we didn't know it existed until it was someone found J&S steel came for the invoice to be paid, so that's how it was discovered.
Thank you for the explanation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Any further questions or discussions regarding this resolution? All right, seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Counselor Bond,
Yes,
Counselor Kelly,
Yes.
Mayor Rosenquist,
Yes.
and I also am yes. So this item will pass to the regular agenda for the council meeting. All right, thank you so much, Chief. I don't think we have any further questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, have a great night. All right, so item number 5, is there any new business for this committee? I actually have some. I mentioned it at the council meeting, but I just wanted to kind of loop back to it again. I know we got that email talking about potentially a reduced speed limit in the city, certainly in some areas, and I think that that could potentially be very helpful. I think a lot about the way people drive, and I think a lot of people look at the speed limit more as a speed guide, and they'll take some liberties with it, which we certainly see on some of the streets. Mary, you saw it yourself on Cumberland Ave not too long ago. I definitely see it on Saley, especially in this area where we don't have a lot of stop sign mitigation, so there's a big stretch. So people definitely take that 30 mile per hour pretty liberally, and I think they'll push it up to 40 or in some cases even 45, depending on how much speed they can get, how open the area is. So I thought that the proposal of potentially looking at lowering the city speed limit to 25, or again, potentially in certain areas, might be a helpful deterrent. I mean, we've talked a lot about other safety mitigation measure that we try, and for some, again, driving down my street earlier today at what I felt was a reasonable speed, I looked down, it was 25. So I just think it's something that I don't know if it would have support from members of this committee or other members of the council, but I thought it was something that was worth discussing as we continue to move towards being, an increasingly pedestrian friendly and cyclist friendly city.
Yeah.
So I just wondered what thoughts people might have on that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, please.
sorry. And I agree that people need to go slower. My street is absolutely horrendous. But what is going to make them look at a 25 mile an hour speed limit and say, oh, I'm gonna do 25, any more than looking at a 30 and saying, okay, I'm gonna do 30?
I don't know. Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't necessarily think they do 25, but like, I think instead of doing, like, it might bring them closer to doing 30 or 30, like risk area, because they're going to think, and the truth is a lot of times people can feel like they're not going to get pulled over if they're within 5 or 10 miles of the speed limit. So I'm just thinking maybe if it was a little lower, it might get people to come at least down a little from the places they're hitting now.
I'm not arguing, but I definitely wouldn't argue with that. And I guess it can be said that if you put 25 mile an hour signs everywhere and you're doing 30, you're gonna, maybe the realization they're gonna get tickets a whole lot faster.
That's the hope. I mean, I don't know, because I mean, you're certainly right.
Nice. Yeah.
We've certainly come into the fact that, of course, we can only control what people do so much, despite our mitigation efforts. So it's just a thought. So, Councilor Kelly, Mayor, do you guys have any thoughts on this idea?
Well, I remember hearing one time that the state sets the speed limit for municipalities.
Oh.
And you have to jump through some hoops with the state to change your local speed limit. And I'm not sure what that means. But we've been discouraged from doing it in the past. I don't know if that means we can't try again. I'd be happy to try again.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea, but we have to keep that in mind and perhaps work with the state in some way to make that happen. Because I guess maybe because there are state routes that run through the city or
Right.
something. But something we'll have to work with. Maybe our planner knows something about that. I would hope so.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation, counselors, is to float this by the senior planner. Have her do some work on what that may look like. Obviously, it would, and not that this should deter us, but it will cost some dollars to, change all the city signs. But that being said, that's not a insurmountable hurdle.
It doesn't have to be done at this minute, right? I mean. It could be like whatever.
Could be done in a year from now.
Yeah.
Right.
And then also, there's factors that we can start to really chip away at, like enforcement and speed traps. And, I hear it too, obviously, about hot spots in the city, Cumberland Ave, for example. I followed an 18-wheeler the other day, going down South Peru Street at 40 miles an hour. South Peru Street, right? And so Wall Street or
May Mill.
Main Mill.
Holy moly, they go down.
I pulled up at the corner of Wall and Main Mill, and look, I saw this car down. Look, I couldn't gauge how fast, but they were going very fast, very fast. And you just think like,
I will pull into my driveway as slow as I can,
yeah,
just to get them to slow down, and I'll sit there and stare at them, go for it, I don't care, smash my car, I wanna know it anyway. So I mean, but I will, and I'm right near that trailer park,
Yeah.
that big yellow house, that's mine,
Right.
and it's like,
yeah.
And we do have relatively narrow streets. So, I mean, especially like I would say the fact that there are state routes that run through our downtown is even more of a reason, especially since, again, our downtown is becoming even more walkable and we're taking strides to make it that way. We're still going to have the parking on both sides. Our roads just aren't that wide. So when we've got trucks and things like that coming through our city streets, better that they be encouraged to go slower than that they just can barrel through. So I think it would be great to look into, to what the process might be or what that would look like. I think it would be just good to start gathering some information about that.
I totally.
I know we're, especially with the parks and everything, we're going to have the parks more active, kids running around more, all of these hopes that we have for the city, I think are conducive to maybe looking at a safer speed limit. So,
Okay, thank you.
okay. So any other new business for this committee tonight? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comment this evening? I can't see the audience, but it doesn't appear that there's any public comment. Okay, so seeing none, I will now take a motion to adjourn. Motion from Councilor Bond, second by Councilor Kelly. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you so much. I hope everybody has a great night.
Thank
Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you.